So this talk is called Misrepresenting Experiments in Special Relativity. In previous videos I've dealt with Einstein's relativity being misunderstood, mistranslated, etc. So basically I don't agree with the relativity that is commonly espoused. Now that relativity which is commonly espoused I say is nonsense. Thus I'm going to criticise the relativity that is taught. So you got to bear in mind there's a difference between the corrected relativity and the relativity that is taught, and so I'm going to criticise the relativity that is taught because it's wrong. Part of the method of teaching special relativity is to talk nonsense and then to misrepresent the experiment by saying that nonsense is supported by experiment. Physics is supposed to be supported by empirical evidence, but physics is turned into a farce when the evidence is misrepresented, as per normal way of teaching relativity. Example will now follow. So this website teaches relativity, Einstein light. And it's run by this person, Professor Wolf. After going through the issues of special relativity, he finally gets to telling you this on a page where he talks about the weirdness and the logic of the principle of invariance of the speed of light, basically meaning the constancy of light speed c in a vacuum. That's an admission that the logic of relativity is weird. I would say more appropriately it was nonsense. Weird logic or nonsense logic. So he raises the questions. How weird is the invariance of the speed of light? Is the principle of special relativity really counterintuitive? And to which he replies, when he's talking about two observers, one called Zoe and one called Jasper. Jasper views Zoe in a moving spaceship. So Wolf is saying this. It depends on how one expresses it and to whose intuition one appeals. For example, it does seem counterintuitive that the speed of light does not depend on the motion of the observer. And he goes on to say the rest of it. And my comment on that, all that is just nonsense based upon mistranslating Einstein's 1905 relativity paper, an issue dealt with in my other videos. Anyway, still going with his false relativity, he is just talking nonsense. So now skipping ahead, after he's given a lot more explanation, he gets to this. Wolf says, at this stage, many of my students say things like the invariance of the speed of light among observers is impossible, or I can't understand it. So my comment is, so he's been talking a great deal of nonsense, and the students he is talking to don't understand what he's talking about. The students think he has been talking nonsense, and he doesn't accept that he has been talking nonsense, and he just carries on. The educators such as himself hope that eventually the students will accept the nonsense. If don't, stop espousing more nonsense. So ideally he should have stopped there and realised he'd been talking nonsense to his students, but he doesn't, he just carries on. Wolf says, at this stage, many of my students say things like the invariance of the speed of light among observers is impossible, or I can't understand it, and he should stop there. But he's going to carry on. And he says, well, it's not impossible. I.e., he's going to deny what he says is nonsense and pretend it makes sense. And he then goes on to say, Wolf says, it's even more than possible, it is true. My comment on that, that's extreme gaslighting. And now going to falsely claim the nonsense he says is supported by experiment. Sort of gaslighting means you're telling a lie and you're not going to accept you're telling a lie, and you're going to carry on pretending you're telling the truth even though you're lying. Wolf says this is something that is being extensively measured, which is the speed of light, and so forth for special relativity, and many refinements to the Michelson-Morley experiment and complementary experiments have confirmed this invariance. That's the invariance of light speed to very high precision. And my comment on that is just lies, and presumably lies arising from him not understanding experiment. Wolf then goes on to say, as to understanding it, there isn't really much to understand. And my comment is, now he is severely delusional and wants the students he is talking to join his delusions. Wolf then goes on and says, however surprising and weird it may be, it is the case. It's true in our universe. The fact of the invariance of C may require some accepting, but it doesn't take much understanding. What requires understanding are its consequences and how it can be integrated into what we already know. So my comment is, so he thinks the Michelson-Morley experiment and complementary experiments, which is really just slight variations on the basic Michelson-Morley experiment, shows the constancy of light speed c, but that is just a false belief about experiment. So now I'm going to go by this paper. It's by John Norton. This is John Norton. He's specialised in Einstein. Norton says, even today, this point needs emphasis. The Michelson-Morley experiment is fully compatible with an emission theory of light that contradicts the light postulate. And the light postulate is the idea of light speed constancy, or that we're talking about is light speed invariance. Wolf is an educator of relativity, and it has not filtered down to him that he is misrepresenting the results of experiments. The experiments do not show light speed constancy. The experiments can be interpreted in other ways. But as an educator, Wolf wants to talk nonsense and say that nonsense is backed up by experiments when it isn't. So the conclusions are, educators just want to talk nonsense. This is in relativity. Then they need some sort of authority justification for that nonsense, and try to do that by falsely representing experiments. This sort of falsehood permeates the scientific community. It's supposed to be that science / physics goes by empirical evidence, but what point is that empirical evidence when the method is now to falsely represent it to students? So that's the end of this video. Experiments are being falsely represented.